Hey, everybody, and welcome to the Latter Day Lens. I'm so glad you're with us this week. I'm your host, Matt, and with me, as always, is Sean. And we have with us David. David is back with us again. Hasn't
Good
it
to be
been
here.
like first time in 2026, right, David?
Yeah,
All
making the
right.
rounds.
All right. Welcome back. We might see you again in 2027 or something
Yeah.
like that. First, David is the strongest BYU sports fan I know. And so I just have to check in, David. How you feeling? Like feels like they were better with Jimmer than with AJ.
Well, yeah. No, a little tough note at the end, but still fun stuff. Stuff you've never seen before at BYU. We'll
Okay.
keep it
What about
going.
the football season? Was that a disappointment for you?
It depends on your point of reference.
Well, I'm asking you.
Back-to-back 12-in seasons, you don't argue with that. So
Oh,
if you're shooting higher, then it's a disappointment. And yeah, there's room to grow.
all right.
I can't be unhappy with that.
Okay. I'm wearing my Top Gun shirt today because I just finished flying an airplane for the first time in my
Oh,
life.
For your
It was
birthday.
so good.
How
Yeah,
was
it was
it?
great. We did this thing called zero gravity where
Oh,
like you go up and then you go down real fast, and then he made my cell phone like float in the air. That kind of did a number on my
The
stomach.
vomit comet, I think, is what they call it. That's how
But
they film movies with zero gravity stuff.
oh, really?
Yeah.
Um that was a little bit rough on the stomach, but other than that it was great. I got to like take control of the plane. If you need somebody to taxi a plane around the runway, I'm really good at that now. I can drive with my feet and move the plane around. So, yeah, it was good. You guys, have you done it before, David or Sean?
No.
Oh,
no thanks. Not
all
interested.
right. You
Sounds
should.
sounds like a nightmare a bit to me.
We have some great photos of our house and of our tiny little city of Rexburg. And anyhow,
My wife did it one year for her birthday, and I was mad. I was angry. I was like, "Why?
what?
Why take the risk?" You know, remember last week we talked about this, Matt? I gave you a list of like 30 celebrities who have died in those little airplanes.
Yeah, but death is not the worst thing that happens in this life. Death is like the begin. Like death is why I'm here.
I
I don't
thought
care
death
if
was
I
the
die.
final
Kind
enemy.
of the
The
last
same,
thing that happens in this life.
yes, the last thing, yeah. And
It's
it
the
is the
most.
final enemy. It's the final enemy that Christ will crush under his
He
foot.
ha- he has overcome death. I feel good about my standing with my Savior. I've got nothing holding me here except for the people I love and the things I love to do.
They
So,
need
like,
you,
What a
if this
good
Matt.
lifetime,
message going into Easter. The power of resurrection. Go fly airplane.
right? I don't know if I told you, this is a really personal experience, but I guess I'll just share it with everybody. But after my grandma died, she died about 2 months ago. I had a really powerful spiritual experience in the temple with her. And it was just clear to me because she was 94 when she died. It was clear to me that she was like, look, life was hard. Life wasn't always fun. And now I'm with my husband for eternity and I'm as happy as can be. And who cares about whatever you guys do in that life? I don't care about you guys anymore. I'm like this is what I lived life for. And so ever since then, I'm sort of like, what am I so attached to this life for? I'm not suicidal, but it's like this is I'm here to prepare for something way better than this, and so I don't care about holding on to this.
That's a wonderful, faithful. I've always loved your faith, and that is part of your faith. But guess what? You've got people here who need you.
Yeah, well, if they need me, I'll still be here, and I won't die because I crashed a plane or something like that. I'll be here for them as a quadriplegic or something like that. I just strongly we believe we don't go before it's our time to go unless we're doing
Yeah,
something stupid. And flying a
like
plane's not
flying a
just
plane. Oh, oh,
that doesn't fit.
oh. Okay.
All right. Well, we had a listener write in on our podcast, on our YouTube channel. And so, just as a shout out to I think there's like 15 YouTube viewers, but if you go to YouTube, you get to see our faces. And so just as a shout out to that one person, this is what they said. I don't think the church has learned the lesson of using its money to help the poor. So I forgot to put the person's handle, but I don't think they're a faithful member of the church, but I'm going to just politely disagree with this listener. I do think the church has learned the lesson of using its money to help the poor. The church does a lot to help the poor.
I
I
think
think it's a
most people's.
valid question, but I don't think it's a valid accusation.
Yeah,
There you go.
there you go.
There you
I think most people's complaint is as a percentage of what the church owns, they don't help the poor. I think that's mostly the complaint that I hear. But it's like, well, that's a relative viewpoint,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Right. I mean, they're building temples and churches and paying for people to serve missions, and I don't know.
I get lost in the big numbers sometimes. Like the difference between 1 million and 1 billion is one consonant, but you know how long it takes to count to 1 million? Like if you just count it out loud from 0 to 1 million.
Mr. Beast probably has done it before, right?
So it's statistically, if you could do one at every second, not eat or sleep or anything, it'd take you 12 days to reach 1 million.
Wow.
And a couple, like 20 years ago, somebody set the record of counting out loud. He spent his whole, 16 hours a day,
Wow.
his waking moments, and it took him about 3 months to count to 1 million.
Wow.
Out loud, And so when you consider that there's numbers that are multiple millions, multiple billions, you can, you know how you got like your home checking account where paychecks come in and bills go out. And then sometimes you got a reserve account. Maybe it's a brokerage or maybe it's a savings account or something. So the church's savings account is the Ensign Peak, folks. That's not the operating account. That's the reserve fund. We put the excess stuff that's not being used into Ensign Peak, and they have filings every quarter with the SEC. You go to sec.gov. I did that this week. $56 billion that we've got tucked away, not in operation, just as a reserve fund.
Wow.
But if you divide that across whatever, 10-ish, 15, 17, however you want to quantify church membership, that's somewhere between 4,000 and 6,000 per person. And that number doesn't seem quite as crazy to me.
Yeah.
That seems like a reasonable amount to have tucked away to do whatever needs to be done as church evolves. And I don't know. It's just so easy to get lost in big numbers that are not part of my usual calculus as I go through life.
When you preface that whole thing by saying the numbers get elusive to you, you handled them pretty well. Like you gave it some clarity.
Yeah, that was good.
That was good.
David helped us understand those numbers. So how long to count to 1 billion? That'd be 1,000 times 3 months.
250 years is how long it takes to count to 1 billion out loud.
That's insane, man.
I'm going to try that after I'm dead. When I have more free time on my hands.
You'll have time on your hands if you keep flying.
Matt, if you just decided to count during the hours that you're watching court TV, you might get through it pretty quick.
I actually saw a video of Mr. Beast explaining, because one of his first videos that went viral was him counting to 100,000. And he literally said he was trying to figure out a way to make money while he was watching, I think it was Game of Thrones, some TV show.
Are you serious?
Yeah, so all he did is put his camera up on his television, and while he's watching Game of Thrones, he was just counting to 100,000, and that became the video that went viral for him and made him really popular.
Now I understand why that guy's the hero of so many. Now I get it. Now that you've explained that. Thank you.
You'll go places the rest of us don't go. So here's some church school scuttlebutt for Matt, right? Because that's your world.
Mm-hmm.
So Ernest Wilkinson's the president of BYU for like 20 years. And they're transformative years. Campus is growing, blah, blah, blah. But I think it's at a time when the church still was like barely keeping its head above water financially. You're doing spaghetti dinner fundraisers and pancake sales to build the chapel yourself. Lots of people talk about those days. And so he's going back and forth to Salt Lake, having to keep asking for more money. If we grow this, it'll turn into something special. I think there was tension around that. And so about 15 years in, he's at a meeting with the board of trustees, and they ask him to step out for a minute because they have something they need to discuss without him. And he's kind of concerned. Then when he steps back in, President McKay actually gives him the very nice news that they've decided to name the Student Union building that's just been finished after him.
Oh,
but that's what's in the water is he's on some thin ice because of the need to play tug of war with finances. And his successor was Dallin Oaks. Like that is the world that our current leadership has lived through as they figure out how to make sure things don't get that tight, that tense. And doesn't surprise me if we're erring on the side of caution, maybe more than we should, but that's who we've got and why, and it's not that surprising.
During that period of time, the church offered to sell Rick's college to Idaho, the state of Idaho, for $1. And the state of Idaho said, no
deal.
We don't want it. And that's why BYU Idaho is where it is today, because the Idaho state didn't want it.
Wow.
Yeah, because Weber State used to be a church school. Other schools used to be church schools, and other states purchased them. So otherwise, there could have been a BYU Ogden. Sean, imagine
I
BYU
think
Ogden.
there's plenty of stuff that we don't publicize too. Like
Yeah.
not every service project has the yellow vests and photographers, and
Uh-huh.
don't let your right hand know what your left hand's doing. I think we actually do plenty of spending and service that just doesn't get in the world report that you see on TV.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Uh,
All right, so first up on the thought provoker, this is a David special. He wrote this question for us, and I love
yeah.
it. Mosiah 29 teaches, do your business by the voice of the people. We claim that agency and self-determinism played a large role in the war in heaven and the plan of salvation. The young women theme include choice and accountability as among their stated values. So the question is, does gerrymandering get in the way of good government by the voice of the people, or is it a feature of things being run well at the state level? It seems like the very prominent redistricting efforts across the country have been much more about serving a party than reflecting the voice of the people. If it's a problem, how do we avoid the fox guarding the henhouse if we leave it up to elected officials? I can go first on this one.
Yeah, let's hear it.
Well, so the reality is, I don't want to get too much into like economic theory, but there are a number of ways to rig a majority vote. And elected officials and politicians and government leaders have, from the dawn of time, created electoral systems that rig the majority in their favor. And the United States is no exception to that.
From the beginning, they've
And
done that? From
sure, Sean,
Really?
why do we have the Electoral College? What role does the Electoral
Don't-
College have?
Don't get mad at me, Matt. I'm asking my political science professor.
So
Well,
we'll come back to Matt in a second, but
Yeah.
this week, in fact, is the birthday of the term gerrymandering, because in March of 1812, Elbridge Gerry, a signer of the Declaration of Independence, who was Massachusetts governor at the time, would later become vice president for a couple of weeks before he died. He was putting his thumb on the scales of the local elections up in Massachusetts, and
Wow.
the political cartoon said, "Wow, you made such a weird shape on this map. It looks like a lizard, look like a salamander. It's a gerrymander." That's how we got the name.
No
Because
way.
this is going back to the founding fathers. And
Yeah.
ever since then, no matter which side you're on, people put their thumb on the scales.
Wow,
So,
that's a
back
cool
to Matt.
story.
But happy
David.
birthday to the term gerrymandering. We
The
should say
salamander.
gerrymandering.
Gary
But it
the
was a-
salamander.
That's how it got its name.
That's cool.
Well, but I'll just say, like, going back to Moses 29, if we say do your business by the voice of the people, in reality, there's no such thing as the voice of the people,
Uh-oh.
because how you interpret that, how I interpret that, how we decide to measure that already puts some bias into the voice of the people. And so I agree. Like, I think it's an aspirational, wonderful idea. We should all try to govern ourselves by the voice of the people. But in reality, somebody has to make the laws. Somebody has to decide how the votes are going to be counted. Somebody decides who gets to vote and when they get to vote. And all of those decisions could be made in an objective, unbiased manner, but it's unrealistic to think that they ever will be.
So, Matt, you're saying that the logistics of getting the actual accurate majority voice of the people is so subjective. It's so difficult, or there's not a really clean, plain way to do it, that you personally would look at, for example, gerrymandering and go, it's not that bad because it's just one way to collect the majority or the voice of the people. Is that what you're saying?
It's the system that we decided right under our Constitution. So just as a really, really simple example, there are in the state of Idaho 4 people that go to the House of Representatives. So you could choose those 4 people that Utah is going to send to the House of Representatives. We could choose to divide up districts and say whoever wins each of those 4 districts gets to go to the House of Representatives. You could also do something called proportional representation, and people could say, I'm with a party, and the Democrats in Utah choose their top 4 people, and the Republicans choose their top 4 people, and the Libertarians choose their top 4 people, and the people, when they go to vote, they just choose which party they like best. And those 4 get decided based on the proportion of the vote that they get. So in Utah, probably the Republicans would get 65%, maybe 60%. Democrats would get maybe 40%. But let's say it changed and there was some independent party that went like 2 were for Republicans and 1 was for a Democrat and 1 was for this third party. You could do it that way. That's the way a lot of countries do it. The reason we don't do it that way is because the people that are in power, when you explain to them what would happen if we switched our election system, they fight, and say, no, we're not going to change our election system. When Idaho had on the ballot 2 years ago this opportunity to change it to like ranked choice voting, you know who the strongest opposition to that was? The Republican Party in the state of Idaho. Because the people who are in office right now are winning. They
Yeah.
know how to win under the current system. And so they have no incentive to change the rules because at best it kicks them out of office. Or I guess that at best they have like less firm of a majority or less certainty, and then at worst it kicks them out of office. So
Okay.
the people making the laws are the ones who are winning in the current election rules, and
So
it's very hard to get them to change.
okay, so Matt, so if you what you've taught me is that we live in a complex society, and if the goal is to give the people the voice, there are various ways of doing that. You're suggesting it's okay that sometimes it's a bit strategic and can influence one or the other or give more power to one or the other. Question though, shouldn't the thing that drives the multiple choices of how we give the majority voice, shouldn't it be God's agency? Like agency is such an abundant doctrine throughout scripture. So like if there's a system that predetermines an outcome, doesn't that erode true agency? And shouldn't our system be driven about you need it, agency requires meaningful options. And it's not really a meaningful option, me living in California when I'm voting for the presidential election, because literally my voice doesn't matter if I'm not a Democrat. I don't have agency
Well,
here.
I think what our system rewards is strength of opinion and willingness to put action behind that opinion. So we can ask the three of us, who do you prefer to have for president of the United States? Some of us might feel stronger about that than others of us. And so the system as it is now rewards people who care so much that they're willing to give their money, or they're willing to give their time, or they're willing to go do something about it. And if all you want to do is sit at home on election day and just go vote, then your voice has less weight than the voice of other people. And maybe that's the way it ought to be. What do you
That's a
think, David?
distorted voice,
Yeah.
right?
Well,
We want the voice of the people, and the people have a wide range of life experience and opportunity to participate, but they are still the people.
but we don't really want the voice of the people because we don't want, in many states, felons to be able to vote. We don't want non-citizens to be able to vote. We don't want children to be able to vote. So we don't really want the voice of the people because we make decisions about which people we actually want to hear from.
Hmm. So here's the reason I mean, this question is in the air. Texas doing stuff, California's doing stuff, Utah's trying to do stuff. I don't know if it'll happen or not, but we were in DC a couple years ago. We did the thing where you go to the Capitol building and meet your representative, and you stand in some lines, but that's kind of fun and pretty quick visit, maybe 10, 15 minutes. And I don't recall anything very notably great or bad about my representative. I thought the opportunity was terrific.
Is it Kennedy? Kennedy's your representative, or Celeste Malloy?
So at the time, so I'm in St. George. I'm way down in the corner. I'm like 10 miles from Arizona, 10 miles from Nevada. My rep was from Farmington, which is north of Salt Lake. It's north of Lagoon.
Yeah.
And in my voting district, somehow, as they divided Utah into 4 separate chunks of population, somebody decided that north of Lagoon and down in St. George should be represented in the same way.
Uh-huh.
Now, we have statewide office to do statewide representation, like senators
Yeah.
and governors, but for my local district representation, that's how it had been drawn up.
Yeah.
And I think that's distorting the local effect that it should have in pursuit of serving a party by divvying up the minority vote. It takes the voice of the people and then it funhouse like mirrors it and makes it too squatty or too long. And it's not absolutely wrong, but it's distorted. And so I'm saying, what can we do to not be distorted? That seems
David,
like a fair question.
Matt,
Well,
you get the points for explaining actually a fascinating point I never thought of, and I understand, and I thank you for educating. David gets the points because you're right. In the pursuit, if we have choices of how we're going to decide how the majority voice gets represented, then maybe we need to lean towards systems that give us more agency, not less, and give us more choices.
Well, let me try and get your points, Sean, because we believe in the divinely inspired Constitution, and the system we have is set up under the divinely inspired Constitution. So
Is it
the fact that people,
what part does it specifically say? Like, what part is constitutional?
well, the Constitution says that there will be a House of Representatives made up with a proportion of the states, and it gives states the rights to choose how they're going to select their electors for Congress.
It does say
And so
that?
then yeah.
Yeah.
And so then states make their laws about how they want to do it. Not everyone does it this way. I think it's Nebraska, maybe it's Maine. Well, that's for the Electoral College, but states have a lot of variety in how they choose people to be in the House of
And
Representatives.
is it
It's not
common that those ways that each state chooses gets challenged and goes to court? Is that common or not common?
only if they violate provisions of the Constitution, right? Like they
Yeah.
used to racially gerrymander to make it so that African Americans couldn't be represented as well.
And the
And
13th
now they've,
Amendment of the Constitution would,
yeah, said you
right,
can't do
protect
that.
against that, right?
Yeah.
But there's
So I'm,
no but the last
my,
couple of years of gerrymandering in Texas and gerrymandering in California, there's no challenges of that legally because it's just fine.
well, it'll go to state constitutions, right? Some states are violating their own constitutions, but the federal government, for the most part, says this isn't a federal question. This is,
Oh,
as long as you're not making it so people can't vote, which is going to be our next question, then you're fine. You can decide how you want to decide. By the way, it wasn't until the 1820s that you even had elections for like the president of the United States. And senators weren't elected until like the early 1900s. So I don't know. I say whatever. Let people do how they want to do it. Let's stay. I just believe in the divinely inspired Constitution, and so that
okay,
feels to
maybe.
me like the
Oh,
Latter Day
man.
Lent.
Dang, you guys, you're making me like you're pulling me both ways. David, this is a great question. So, Matt, I guess that would be then in federalism, that would be more agency, right? If the states and the people of those states have the opportunity to decide their own way of electing officials, whether that's gerrymandering or that's some other way, maybe that is more agency.
Well, and so
My
most of
question to Matt is, okay,
yeah,
so we either have to leave it up to the elected officials, and basically we're letting officials pick the voters instead of voters pick the officials in this case,
yes,
which I don't like,
yes.
or we have to have some sort of, you call it neutral party, you call it independent board, some other process by which the rules of the game are determined, other than the people who just won the last inning, right?
Well, so
Yeah.
So do
California,
any of those look good? I don't know.
no,
It feels like
California
the
has.
elected officials are not making it a fair game. So
There's
is there a
self-interest
different
there, yeah.
referee that then call your own fouls?
Well, so in California, they have a law that says that like those districts are supposed to be drawn up by a board who's nonpartisan. And they passed a voter referendum ignoring that for the next 2 years or for the next election, right? In Utah, they passed a law saying that it had to be drawn up in a certain way. And the state legislature said, no, we're going to ignore that. And the courts right now in Utah are kind of forcing them to go with the law that was passed on the books with the referendum. So I don't know that it's better to trust vote. In the case of California, when you say let's leave it up to the elected officials, then the elected officials say to the voters, wouldn't it be better if we did this in a partisan way? And the voters say, yeah, let's do it in a partisan way. So I don't know that saying that the voters should decide is actually a better thing. Like voters, I don't know, they're fickle. They change their minds a lot.
Amazing topic, David. Like a guy like me who's kind of neutral, kind of normal humans, not like you, smart nerds. It's such a polar. Like I can see both sides of what this debate is about. It is a fascinating one.
Well, I will say this, the value of the electoral system we have is that most of the fights happen within the political parties. If you had a proportional representation system like I described earlier, where Utah would have, say, 2 Republicans, a Democrat, and then some third party, those people get to Washington, D.C., and they tend to fight with each other, and they can't get the. If we think there's gridlock now between those 2 parties, it's even worse when you have multiple parties in a legislative body. So in some ways, I totally understand what you're saying, David. But again, on these things, I say, if you don't like it, get involved in the Republican Party. You could totally win office as a Republican legislator for your district in St. George, and you could do something different.
Do it, David. Do it. Please do it. Please do
You're
it.
you're you're every bit as talented as Spencer Cox. You're every bit as wise as Spencer Cox. He just put his hat in the ring and did it. And so I feel like our system rewards people that are doing that. And so we should just kind of, if we don't like it, we should just contend against them and say,
You just
I don't
have
like it.
20 years to burn to get there.
So this is like the dirty little secret that most people don't know. Most people who are in the House of Representatives in state government didn't actually run for office their first time getting there. They were active in a political party, and then the person who was holding that seat either resigned or took a different job in the middle of their term. And so
Strategically?
well, sometimes it's just promotion. I'll
Oh,
tell you in a
okay.
second about what happened in Montana. But
Please.
so sometimes it's strategic, but oftentimes, like, somebody's like, let's say you're representing St. George and you get this opportunity to go do something else. So you leave your position there and now it's open. And guess who gets to choose who takes that open spot? The local Republican Party. They just
Oh,
choose
wow.
somebody.
Because
Wow.
it's a safe seat, because
Yeah.
they're non-competitive, and they never change hands.
And most people in politics today got their start in the local political party. Somebody resigned, they got appointed to that seat, and then they just had to win re-election from then on.
That's amazing,
So
dude.
so this is happening in Montana right now. There's a senator in Montana. He's the Republican senator of Montana. He announced that he was going to run for re-election, so nobody's running against him because who can beat his name's Steve Daines? Who can beat Steve Daines in Montana? Well, then it turns out that his chief of staff, somebody close to him, decides to run for that seat 15 minutes before the filing deadline. And then Senator Dane says, I've decided I'm not going to run for re-election. And so now she's going to be the Republican nominee for the state of Montana for that Senate seat because nobody even knew that he was going to retire and not run for re-election. And she's the only one that filed to run. So it's hers. I mean, unless people in Montana decide to not vote for a Republican, then it's hers. So I don't know. I feel like we should be rewarding the people who are putting the time and effort into putting that work
Wow.
in.
David, what do you think of that?
I
Wow.
recognize how difficult it is to determine what is fair. Like, is the fair thing that the majority always wins, or is the fair thing to represent some voice of who didn't win, right? There's all these layers of government, but I just don't like that what it's left us with is, okay, we've got 435 seats coming up in 6 months, and obviously we need a functional Congress, and 90% of them are predetermined.
Yeah.
Because they've all been rigged and tailored to just fit one type of voter. And so what I don't like is that they feel like they've all got us pegged. Like, you're the red people, you're the blue people. If you're this age and this background and you live in this geography, we already, it's like we've already accounted for you. We don't have to take you into consideration. You're safe. And only like 8 or 10% of the country even matters for making decisions. That feels like it distorts the voice of the people.
Well, that leads right into the next question with the Save America Act that the Republicans and Trump are trying to pass, which would require proof of citizenship to register to vote and would restrict mail-in voting. They claim that mail-in voting is subject to fraud, which is ironic since Trump regularly votes by mail. Campaign operatives argue that this bill would actually harm Republicans in elections because having to register or re-register to vote in person would present a severe disadvantage to disabled people and millions of rural Americans who are mostly Republicans. Voting laws in the United States have always been about giving advantage to certain groups of people. But as David pointed out, God wants leaders to listen to the voice of the people. So the question is, does this mean that any laws that restrict the right to vote are immoral?
And
Because
you're
I'll tell you
saying,
this.
and Matt, you're saying that to require proof of citizenship is a restriction to voting. Is that what you're suggesting?
Of course it is.
Well, I
How
mean,
do you prove citizenship? You prove citizenship with a passport or a birth certificate. A passport costs $180 right now to get a passport. A birth certificate is the same thing. So in the past, when they passed laws like this, because it's unconstitutional to require a poll tax in order to vote. So in the past, the Supreme Court has said, if you're going to require ID, if you're going to require proof of citizenship, you have to offer those things for free so that people don't have to pay money in order to vote. But they're not doing that in the SAVE Act. So yeah, requiring proof of citizenship is just, so back to the thing.
Hang on. You're saying because it costs money to get proof of citizenship, and does it like in every state to get any
A passport's issued by the federal government. It's at least $180 to get a passport.
What about a driver's license or some other?
Driver's license doesn't prove citizenship. You have
It
to have a
doesn't?
birth certificate or a
Nope.
passport.
Not according to
Oh.
this act.
Yeah.
How much does
Yeah.
the birth certificate cost?
Well, you got to figure out where you were born, right? What county you were born in, and then each of those counties has different fees in order to order your birth certificate.
And
So the
if your
fact
name
that-
changed, if you got married and your driver's license has a different name than your birth certificate, then you also need your marriage certificate. So you bring 3 papers in to register to vote, and hopefully you had them all.
But again, like I was saying before,
Matt, hang on. though. If your issue is with the cost, would you be okay with the SAVE Act if it was free to get your birth certificate?
I'm okay with the SAVE Act if the government is going to make sure that everybody has proof of citizenship. So if line 1 of the SAVE Act is everybody gets proof of citizenship for free sent to them electronically or whatever in some way that is valid, I would be more okay with the SAVE Act.
So
But
for you, it's not an issue with you requiring to prove that you're a citizen. The issue with you is you're charging me to prove that I'm a citizen.
well, broadly, my issue is that I think that any law that restricts the right to vote is immoral. You can't do something by the voice of the people if you restrict people from exercising their voice. So in my view, if we're supposed to do business by the voice of the people, we'll just take church as an example, right? We get a new bishop called, and it says all in favor, raise your hand. Any opposed by the same sign. If somebody raises their hand and says opposed, there's no authority that comes in and says, wait, you're not allowed to express opposition. You are of this class. You're too young, or you're.
Hold on. Actually, there is. If I raise my hand, I am instructed to go to the authority to have that discussion, and maybe the authority will consider my point of view. Now, if I'm not a member of the church, it's not going to be considered whatsoever. So I have to probably look at my records and prove that I'm a member of the church in order to have that opposition even
Are
considered.
you serious? You have to be a member to oppose?
Of course. What are you
Nobody's
talking about?
ever seen it happen. Nobody knows.
Yeah, I don't think that's true. I don't.
Why
But
would-
again, let's say it's not a church position, right? It's just we're all in the council in heaven, and we're trying to decide. We go Jesus's plan or Satan's plan, and somebody says, "I vote for Satan's plan." Nobody comes in and like, "Hey, let me see your proof of citizenship in the kingdom of heaven." No, because if you do it by the voice of the people, everybody who's there is a person, and you count their vote.
No,
you count
but-
their voice.
No, but hang on. The church example was the better one, because when you're dealing with a group of people that belong to a certain organization or a certain, organization.
Okay, so
then
so
you
let's-
have to consider that, right? So we're talking about
No.
citizenships of a country.
No,
That's
Sean,
potentially
come on.
abort. That's potentially, you got to consider that.
Sean,
at least. I'm not saying that's
when,
the way you
when
should be.
somebody's elected the mayor of El Centro, California, do they say you're the mayor of the citizens of El Centro, California, or do
I'm
they
sh-
say you're the mayor of the city of El Centro, California?
I don't understand the distinction.
Well, I'll tell you the distinction. If I live in El Centro, California, I'm
Yeah.
a resident of that city.
Yes.
That mayor is supposed to represent me,
Yes.
whether I'm a citizen or whether I'm not a citizen. I live there. I pay my taxes there.
Yeah,
I'm
but you
a
don't-
part of the community.
Oh.
So if I live in El Centro and that person is my mayor and they get to make laws that affect my life and they get to decide what my taxes are and they get to decide whether the police protect my house, so they get to make all those decisions for me, I should have a voice in deciding whether that person gets to stay on as mayor or not. And
Okay,
it
I'm just
shouldn't
playing-
matter whether I'm a
I'm just-
citizen,
I'm
it's
just
just
playing
a
devil's-
resident.
I'm just playing
Yeah.
devil's advocate here. If you're saying because I physically occupy a space, I have claim upon, for example, the mayor of that space, they're accountable to me. What if me occupying that space, what if I don't have a legal right to that space that I'm occupying?
Well, how could you not have a legal right to the space you're on? Who's living in who's a resident of El Centro, California illegally? They're living in an apartment they stole from somebody?
No, they potentially have come into the country illegally. Isn't
Okay,
that a
I can
consideration?
if I come into the country illegally or without proper documentation,
Yeah.
and I sign an agreement with a landlord, I have a legal right to live in the place that I'm renting.
But there's also a legal right to remove that person from the country because they didn't enter through a port of entry. They didn't file the right paperwork. They didn't get in line to get approved. So they're here.
Okay. Same thing
Right?
if I'm living in that place and I speed on the way to work and they give me a traffic ticket. There's a legal right to give me a traffic ticket. That
That's
has
right.
no bearing on whether or not the mayor of El Centro represents me as a resident of El Centro.
I don't know why you would assume that.
I live there. I signed a lease.
But if you don't have a right to live there by
I
law,
do have a right. Though I signed a lease. I'm paying rent. That's my home.
Just because you signed a lease doesn't mean, again, if you didn't enter the country through a port of entry, through a legal process, and I'm not a citizen, why would I have claim upon that? Like that Matt, that doesn't, just because I signed a lease doesn't, like if ICE finds me, that I can't claim, well, I've got a lease here. You have to let me stay in America. That's not going to fly. That's not legal.
Of course that's legal. But
No, it's
regardless
not.
of that, you're
It's
making
not
it about
either.
immigration. I'm not making it about immigration. I'm saying that if the mayor of El Centro has the authority to make laws that affect my life and I live there, then I should have the authority to remove that person through my voice. What is the voice of the people? So you're already creating restrictions, Sean, around the voice of the people, saying that, well, the voice of the people means only people who came in proper ways or people who can do certain things.
Look, I only took this in this direction because the first example you gave was within our church. When we raise our hand to support our leaders, it is as a Latter-day Saint. This is raising our hand to support our leaders. It is as a confirmed and baptized member of the church. And there's no say if I'm not a confirmed member of the church.
Even if you are, there's no say, Sean.
Sure there is. No. I've had plenty of situations that I've known of in the church where someone says, look, I've got some information. I'm going to go talk to the stake president about this bishop or about this person in the calling. And they do consider it. Of course they consider it.
And then they get released. Have you ever heard of them getting released after they were sustained?
I've heard of it once. Yeah, I have.
Wow. Well, that's pretty good. But you got to have information. What if you raise your hand and say, I'm opposed? And I'm like, what do you know? And you're like, I just know I don't like that guy. You have no voice in that situation.
That's right. You don't, because you are a part of a minority and the majority rules. And that's okay. Like, that's unfortunately the system that we probably live in. But
so what
if
I'm
I
saying
am not a member of the ward, it doesn't matter if I have an opinion.
Okay, but I can be a member of a community by the fact that I live there, not by citizenship, by living there.
So then I could have a say in ward leadership if I'm not a member of the church just by sitting in the pew? I don't think so.
All right, what do you say, David?
I think you're speaking to a broader example and principle, Matt, but I want to focus on the immigration thing only because that's what's mostly in the air as this act is being discussed.
Yeah, that's what it's about, Matt.
Not
but
to me.
I'm not sure that's correct. So here's the thing. In my mind, I'm like, we struggle to get voter turnout among legal U.S. citizens. What are the odds there's a whole bunch of illegal folks showing up and casting ballots? This seems unlikely to me.
Great point.
But it gets a lot of blame. Like when elections don't go your way, that's who you assume, mess things up. So there's a couple of states who have been auditing their process and their roles, seeing who's you want to know how big a problem this is. Idaho checked their voter registration rolls and found 36 non-citizens who were on the rolls.
36.
Utah came out with a report in January that they went back through 2 million plus records, all the voters, and they found one who was a non-citizen who was registered to vote. He had not voted, but he was registered to vote.
They've actually audited it, and it's zero. It's
Michigan,
pretty much zero
bigger population. Remember how long it takes to count to 1 million? So Michigan's got 6 million people on their rolls. So that would take you a year and a half to count them all, 1 second apiece. And they found 15.
Oh,
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. Done.
Well done.
It's a
David.
microscopic problem compared to the larger issue. Nationwide, okay, Heritage Foundation, they're the conservative-leaning think tank. They went back and found people who did actually vote illegally. And what's the year range 99 through 2023?
Yeah.
Total of 77 non-citizen voters in those 25 years.
Are
So
you
about
kidding me, dude?
3 per year is what we're fighting over.
I can't
Which
believe.
makes me think that's not actually what's going on behind the scenes. That's the smoke screen. And
Well
I
done.
think, to Matt's credit, there are probably motivations. We're sort of camouflaging this as a fight against illegal non-citizens, but it may have more to do with making sure that the people who are a little more like me are the ones that are better able to vote and show up and be counted.
Or
And in the gospel lens, we are
would
looking
be
out
wrong.
more for the little guy than for the big guy. Not the
Or,
people with
David,
flexible housing and second cars and passports, but the more,
but David,
the widows
or
and the
is
fatherless and the.
or is it possible that they're just like the propaganda that is even just now you've just schooled me and go, okay, now I'm going to change my. That's a complete paradigm shift. But
Oh, you didn't know that, Sean?
that point
That
zero
there's
zero
no
zero
problem.
citizens. No,
Yeah,
how would I know that?
right.
David just gave me all the statistics. I didn't know that. Which
I thought everybody knew that.
I didn't think it was a huge problem, but the propaganda that gets pushed is definitely the reason why they're pushing these things. So
Oh.
is it maybe that the propaganda that is pushed, which seems to be completely just propaganda, maybe the administration goes, well, that's what the people think, so we've got to get them on our side and pass laws.
No, this is 100%.
Does that.
No, this is 100% motivated by Trump. Trump wants to do this because they know who the active people in politics are. They know who the people with passports are. They know who the people that already have their birth certificates are. And they want more of those people voting and fewer of the people who don't have that stuff voting. But Trump is also very short-sighted. He doesn't understand how it will hurt Republicans, probably more than it will hurt Democrats if he does it, because again, Trump is in this information bubble. He doesn't always hear all of the opposing sides, and he doesn't realize, like, in rural America, it's easier for me to mobilize. Like, if I wanted to get Democrats to take over the state of Idaho, the SAVE Act actually helps me in Idaho, because a lot of rural Idahoans are not going to go get their passports just to vote, because they won't realize how much it matters, because it hasn't been competitive here. But I could, as a nonprofit, say, let's get all of these people who haven't participated in the past, let's pay for their passports, let's pay for their birth certificates, and let's mobilize them.
Okay, I'm going to shift my paradigm completely, 100%, give both of you the points and go with your believing. If you just say one thing, please, will you agree to say this?
I don't know.
We need to know the thing.
No, please agree first. Please tell me that those people in Idaho, they're not going to go get their passports and therefore, have proof of citizenship just because it's like there's no point. It's not because they're stupid and they can't afford it. If you say that, then I'm on board. But if your reasoning is, oh, you have to, I'm against people proving citizenship because they're not smart enough or can't afford to get them, then that's a problem. I get that making it a requirement, that it costs money, you can't get it for free, that's a problem. But I want to hear, Matt, you say, I don't think that people are so stupid that they can't get their own ID to prove citizenship.
No, I wasn't saying it's stupidity. I'm saying it's the cost. There's a cost. So anything you do to increase the cost of voting reduces voter turnout. As it is, it makes no sense that anybody ever votes. So if you're going to make me pay $150 just to get a passport to then register to vote, and then I've got to pay attention to they're just increasing the cost so much.
I'm good with that.
People won't participate.
Wow, I'm learning a lot from you two today. Holy cow!
I think the gospel lens says, because I think our goal should be to exclude every non-illegal, non-eligible voter and maximize participation for everyone, every last person who is in the eligible pool. That would be ideal policy. And that includes people who don't have it. It's easy. Well,
not according to Matt.
In my view, I say we need to expand eligibility. I have friends who have lived in the United States for more than a decade who live here and cannot vote because they're not U.S. citizens, because they don't need to be U.S. citizens to live here and work here. And so the idea that people who live here, pay taxes here, contribute to the community should have no say in who their mayor is just because they don't want to go get citizenship. The whole citizenship process, I've said this before, the whole citizenship process has been from the very beginning a racist process, and it continues to be that way. And so to say you have to be a citizen to vote perpetuates racism.
Hang on. But Matt, you also, when I challenged you on this before, one day you said, if you're visiting France for the weekend and it happens to be on an election day, you said that you should have the right to be able to vote in that election. I'm like, wait a minute, come on, dude. Is it about racism, or is it about this laissez-faire freedom for everyone to vote anywhere where they put their feet? Which one is it?
All right, I'll just tell you my data point, and then we'll move on. 1790. This is the first census, right? We first starting to make laws. Constitution was ratified in 1787. The first law about citizenship in 1790. If you are white from a foreign country, you can become a U.S. citizen.
Yeah.
Black people can't become U.S. citizens.
Awful.
And then later on, we say if you're a Native American, you can't be a U.S. citizen.
It's awful.
Like everything
Evil.
about citizenship has always been a racist process. You'll never find for me an example in the history.
Wait, hang on. Why? I agree with you that what you just explained is absolutely evil and wrong. But why would you jump to the conclusion that now in 2026, anything that talks about citizenship is literally racist? You lost me. You had me, and then you lost me completely.
Well, if you build a whole system on racist laws and then say, now we're going to use those laws to determine who gets to vote and who doesn't get to vote, how is that not inherently racist? If you can tell me, Sean, one law where they made it harder for white people to get citizenship and easier for non-white people to get citizenship, then I'll believe you that it's not racist. But every law about citizenship is always about making it easier for white people to become citizens and harder for racial minorities to become citizens.
Today,
pick any of them. Pick any citizenship law you want to at any time in the history of the United States. You'll not find one that ever restricted citizenship for white people.
I mean, people.
So that's why
there's
I say
there are many citizens today that are not white. People who become citizens that are not white.
They overcome a higher barrier.
So you're saying the racist system, they overcame the racist system.
Right. That's right. All right. Let's move on to the next question.
Okay.
This one we can go faster because I think we'll all agree on this one. The partial government shutdown affecting the Department of Homeland Security has left TSA officers without full pay for over a month. 3 Nephi 24:5 condemns those that oppress the hireling in their wages. Is it morally wrong to force TSA workers to do their jobs without pay? All in favor? Anyone want to say no?
No, I'd say yes. David?
This, I'm afraid, is probably a hazard of working for the government, and that's not to be unfeeling. But you're, I suspect that anybody who'd been in that boat for 10 years plus has been through this before. And to be clear, I don't think they're going without pay.
Yes,
they're going to get paid. They're going to get paid for every hour they've worked. It's frozen and it'll be paid back. So they're going to get a bumper crop whenever this. But at my office, I don't know how I'm going to make payroll yet in July. I have to earn the money as we go when we get there, and thankfully it'll happen. It'll go there. But if you work for the government, it has to be appropriated. I don't know how far along in advance, 2-3 years at a time. And a hazard of that, mostly secure job, is that sometimes when the big guys are having a tug of war about finances, you get stuck in the middle. And this is not awesome. It's not welcome, but it's not moral to force, but to be clear, they are going to get every dollar they're owed. It is cumbersome the way it's being frozen temporarily. I wish it wasn't happening for them, but this is a side effect of government operation more than it is the morality of employment.
It's nuanced, but he did just agree with us that it is immoral to force anyone to work. So we're all on the same answer.
But I'll just say this. Historically, it's not for certain that they will get paid. It has always happened in the past. But unless somebody writes that into a bill to say we're going to give them back pay, then they don't get the back pay. That's point number one. Point number two, if you look at the amount of days and hours the federal government has been shut down in the history of the United States, that is 40 times greater in the Trump administration, when Trump is president of the United States, than it is when anybody else is president of the United States. So I don't think it's fair to say that when people go to work for the federal government, they should know that there's a high probability they're going to be forced to work without pay, because that's just something Trump has done. That's primarily a Trump thing, a Trump feature. And so I don't think that it's fair to say to them, look, when you sign on to be a TSA agent in the year 2000...
Do you think they regret the day they were assigned to that job?
I mean...
Or the day they chose that job?
I think that there's that depending on who's president, people get treated differently in the federal government. And I think that what is morally wrong is to, based on your political views, pick and choose how you're going to treat federal workers. So to say ICE agents get to be paid in full, because that matters a lot to me. And TSA agents, you're essential workers. We need you. You can't call off. Therefore, you have to work without pay. That's immoral. If they're essential, you pay for them. And if we, as a country, said if they're essential, they have to be paid, or nobody gets to do anything, then I think we would be being morally correct. I think it's completely wrong to ever ask anybody to pay without work.
Here in just a
right.
second, Matt is going to tell us why San Francisco is such a happy place.
All right, I'm so excited.
And one
about
of the reasons is they have a functional airport. When you look at the when you look at the list of waiting times because of the TSA shutdown at every airport, and it's hours long, even though San Francisco International is almost a top 10 by volume, they don't show up there. They privatized their security a few years ago. They're not part of this mess.
Beautiful San Francisco. Sean, if only everyone could live in California, the land of wonder. So the 2026 Happiness Index is out. Salt Lake City is no longer on the list of the 250 happiest cities in the world. In fact, Kiev, Ukraine is above them at 251 because the group that made the list wanted to give them an honorable mention for their bravery in fighting the Russians. The only U.S. city to make the top 50 on the list is San Francisco. According to the measure, the U.S. is the 23rd happiest country in the world. This group uses 64 measures that cluster into a few kind of meta dimensions of urban happiness. So the first is human and social life, like citizenship, health, and that sort of stuff. There's institutions and systems of government, like how the governments function and the economic system they choose to employ. And then there's the physical environment, like do they keep the streets clean, and are there like accessibility options for people who are disabled? So this is my question. First, I don't think Sean believes that San Francisco is the happiest city in the U.S. But is there something wrong with this measure? Is this the right way to measure happiness, or is there a better way we should measure how cities make people feel?
Okay, so first of all, I would say this is it's a joke. What a joke, right? Okay, but if you're going to study really their criteria, this is not a happiness. It's not measuring happiness. It's maybe quality of life infrastructure. Not even quality. It's not even measuring quality of life. But someone is saying, like, it's such a biased viewpoint. Like, if the infrastructure exists that could potentially make quality of life better, then people are happier. So no, the question is no, absolutely not. There's way better ways to measure happiness. Things like meaning and purpose, things like moral and spiritual alignment, things like things like that. So no, this is
Sean, if
really
you don't have healthcare, you're going to be sad. So healthcare is an important component of happiness. If you can't get on the bus and get to work, you're going to be sad.
Yeah. So you're saying this is the way to measure happiness? You think this is correct?
No. Fact checking, Matt, is why I keep coming back. Right? It's exhausting, so I can only do it a couple times a year. But being able to do peer review on Professor Miles is really what energizes me in this whole process. And our listeners probably know this, but Matt presents like a big teddy bear. And he is a kind, thoughtful person, but he is an expert provocateur, right?
Yes.
What Matt revels in is helping people be uncomfortable so that they think about things in a different way and probably move towards something better. Like that's genuinely, and you could say that's a very Christ-like attribute. He was a provocateur as well.
And is why we love you, Matt.
So Matt coming on here and saying, look, why the heck is Salt Lake below Kiev, Ukraine, and whatever in Uzbekistan, which I'm not making up. There's some place in Uzbekistan that's higher than most everywhere in the United States. Okay, but here's the stupid thing. The study conducted by a couple of French people has, like, they made a cutoff. I went into the weeds on this. I went through the whole stupid criteria. Because I knew what you were doing, and now you were waving the red cape. You were waving the red cape, and here I'm coming. You know this.
Hit him, David. Hit him.
They only measured the 30 biggest cities in like you didn't get evaluated if you weren't within the top 30 cities in your country. Mm-hmm. And they did not even evaluate Salt Lake in this run through. Maybe they did previously under different criteria. but you can't find them under the cities that got analyzed. And so what this is really showing, and for this narrowly defined purpose, it's a valid study, what big cities compare to European big cities, and who does that better? If you're forced to live in a city of 3.2 million or more, how would that be best? How does your subway say, look, I have a 6-minute commute to work, maybe 5, depending on the 2 stoplights. If you try to give my city a grade on public transportation and how well the app works, it's stupid. Like, you can't apply that. So if this is a bonkers metric, and you know dang well what you're doing, Matt. And so here's the nugget of usefulness, because this study is very questionable as to its usefulness. But there's a guy, you might be familiar with him, named Albert Brooks. He's over at Harvard, but he's kind of become like an honorary member, sort of, for being a daily attending Catholic. He's quite familiar with us. I think he's got an affiliate connection at the U and give commencement speech at BYU. He was doing something at UVU just a week or two after the Charlie Kirk thing last year. He's quite familiar with happiness research and psychology, and he has credibility as a researcher, and I think he has gifts for communicating that to people. And so go get you some Albert Brooks in your life if you want more tips. But I think it does boil down to things like relationships, to purpose, to your spiritual well-being. I watched Project Hail Mary last night, and not to spoil the show, but if you've got purpose, right? And if you have a warm relationship with a talking rock, you're going to be just fine.
That's what my wife said. That's what my wife said was the point of that movie.
Yeah.
I missed that. The whole movie, I was just like, what in the world? I was so bored in that movie.
Yeah, Matt has the worst taste in movie. I'm just going to throw that out there. You have the worst taste in movies. You don't like the movie Doubt. I can't believe it. So, but Matt, he did mention Albert Brooks, who is the lead actor in the great movie Defending Your Life, and you like that movie.
So here's my take on this. Yes, David's right in everything he said. And also Sean's right in everything he said. But I do think that there's this part of the study that I have beef with, which is different than what David said. I have beef with this idea that government is supposed to solve our problems, because I don't think that's the latter-day lens, right? So I feel like this study is saying government.
I think my connection just shut down.
Yeah, what
there was a lightning strike.
What did you just say? I mean,
you're gonna have to repeat that.
What the heck?
I'm saying that government should solve problems to the extent that they can, but this metric is saying if you live in a country or a city where the government has a resource for every single problem you could ever face, you're going to be happier than if you live in a city where they don't have a government resource to solve every problem you could ever face. And I think that the role of government in solving problems should not be to have a resource that you can go to for every problem you face, but it should be the latter-day lens approach, that if you are in trouble, we're going to help you through the trouble, and we're going to help you get like Heavenly Father doesn't try to remove obstacles from our life. Heavenly Father tries to help us through the obstacles so we can learn and grow in life. And I think that too many people say, I want government to remove the obstacles in my life. And voters say, what is the government going to do to remove obstacles from my life? And I think that's the big problem with this approach in the study. And it's the problem, like, I think a lot of the problems we have as a society today boil down to people who want the government to remove obstacles from their life rather than help them through obstacles.
Sometimes, Matt, you actually sound like the party you claim to be a member of. Sometimes
I'm a conservative Republican.
It's a rare instance that you prove it.
Well, so for example, like if I have a child with disabilities, the government should provide support to help me care for my child with disabilities. They shouldn't say, we're going to do whatever we can to make sure that you don't have any pain with that, or you don't know that never happens in the first place. Or there should be some support from my community for that situation. But like these sorts of things where it's like it's not the government's job to make sure that I have a clean sidewalk. It's not their job to make sure that the air that I breathe is clean. That's a solution that we should take on ourselves as a community, and not say, oh, this city's great because the government makes sure that nobody ever spits gum on the sidewalk or something like that. Like, they want a little too much government for my satisfaction.
Wow.
And I will say this,
and I'm happy.
I love San Francisco. It's a great place to visit. They have wonderful infrastructure.
It used to be.
But it's also true that there are drug needles all over the place in the parks in San Francisco, that everywhere I go, I smell marijuana. And it's also true that when I look in the eyes of individual people in San Francisco, they're not happy, because oftentimes people's solutions to their problems is like to take drugs or to self-medicate or something like that. And so saying, oh, San Francisco is a great place because if you have a drug habit, they're going to give you drugs, or it's not illegal to do all of these like things that I think don't bring happiness. I don't think that that's actually the solution to happiness. The solution is the things David talked about. And so I think communities could do more to focus on the things that actually build happiness rather than saying we're just going to solve all of your problems.
Wow. I'm floored. I mean, we have to end on that because we just got Matt's preaching the truth, which is wow.
And do you know when this episode is going to land? We released this episode on April 1st. So, April Fools, everybody. Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining us this week. Hope you have a great day. We'll talk to you again next week.